Imagine a vehicle so compact it could slip down trails meant for hikers, yet sturdy enough to pull itself through mud, gravel, and rock without hesitation, a machine that ignored the idea that capability had to come in a large, lumbering package. In an era when off-road confidence was measured in weight and cylinder count, something small rewrote the rules using simplicity, smart engineering, and a willingness to go where it was never expected. That shift did not come from a marketing stunt or a one-off concept. It came from an approach that treated minimalism as a strength rather than a compromise. What followed was a ripple effect through remote communities, adventure culture, and the way drivers measured practical toughness. Today we look back at the exact machine that challenged expectations in 1977 and built its legacy by climbing, crawling, and adapting far beyond its projected reach. Like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments which model or series you want covered next. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 arrived in 1977 as a direct answer to a gap that many drivers did not realize existed. Small off-road machines were often dismissed as toys or temporary solutions, but this model proved that size was not the barrier many assumed. Before its release, rugged terrain generally required bulk, weight, and displacement. The common understanding was that a vehicle needed a large engine and heavy frame to pull itself over rocks, ruts, and steep grades. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 challenged that line of thinking by relying on lightweight construction, a compact power plant, and drivetrain geometry that prioritized traction over brute force. Early observers wondered how something with fewer than 1,000 cubic centimeters of engine capacity could serve farmers, explorers, and government agencies. Yet that skepticism was steadily neutralized as the vehicle found footholds in regions with harsh weather, remote access needs, and cost-sensitive buyers. The first wave of attention surrounded its scale. It could be transported by small ferries, driven through narrow mountain passes, and parked in spaces usually reserved for subcompact city cars, all while maintaining ground clearance and frame durability that matched or exceeded far more expensive options. Owners discovered that the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 did not pretend to be a luxury cruiser or a flashy status symbol. It presented itself as a tool with minimal frills, manual controls, and a focus on function over aesthetics. Under the hood, the naturally aspirated inline engine delivered modest horsepower, yet the gear ratios and part-time four-wheel drive transfer case let the driver apply torque where it counted. In many rural areas, local mechanics appreciated that the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 used straightforward components. Servicing could be done with basic tools, reducing downtime and labor costs. That practicality mattered in regions where spare parts might take weeks to arrive or where field repairs were the only option during planting or harvest seasons. The body style also sparked interest. The short wheelbase contributed to remarkable breakover angles and tight turning capability, and the open cabin layout gave operators adaptability when hauling supplies or navigating forest paths. Critics initially argued that the bare-bones interior and low displacement were evidence of corner cutting rather than efficiency, but real-world performance eroded those claims with every successful climb and crossing. The metal surfaces could be washed out after muddy excursions without caution for delicate materials, and the straightforward dash design eliminated unnecessary weight and complexity. Beyond private owners, some local authorities adopted the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 for coastal patrols, rescue duties in narrow canyons, and terrain surveys in areas that challenged larger vehicles. Once users saw its ability to neutralize obstacles under high-load situations, the model developed a reputation for reliability that overshadowed its relatively small fuel tank and cargo capacity. Another reason the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 gained traction was its affordability. Many buyers who could not approach the price of a full-size truck found an entry point into off-road ownership. That financial accessibility broadened the user base, allowing students, small business owners, and rural families to acquire a dependable machine that handled both daily driving and weekend utility. Over time, word of mouth and practical demonstrations did more for the model than formal advertising, since seeing it pull itself across flooded roads or loose gravel carried more weight than any promotional claim. The layout of the chassis allowed customization as well. Some owners installed light racks, winches, or canvas coverings to adapt the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 for camping, forestry, or ranch supervision. Fuel efficiency further separated it from bigger platforms. In long-distance travel or supply runs, the ability to handle rough roads without liquid consumption spikes was a significant advantage. While not an expressway cruiser by nature, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 could keep up with regional travel demands as long as drivers managed expectations regarding speed and wind noise. In agricultural zones, the vehicle often substituted for tractors when quick mobility and passenger seating were required, and in mountainous regions, it served as an alternative to pack animals for transporting tools and equipment. The short overhangs prevented snagging on steep inclines, and the suspension system, though not plush, absorbed impact well enough to reduce driver fatigue over extended trips. As more imports and licensed assemblies took shape, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 reached markets with different regulatory requirements, prompting minor variations in lighting, bumpers, or emissions equipment. Despite those regional adjustments, the mechanical heart remained consistent. Simplicity remained the selling point. Some surfaces exhibited signs of corrosion more quickly in coastal climates, but owners frequently prioritized function and replaced panels or applied protective coatings as part of regular upkeep. Meanwhile, comparisons to larger vehicles remained inevitable, yet actual tasks completed by the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 gave it a level of credibility that surpassed speculation. One reason operators retained it rather than upgrading to bigger options was maneuverability. When trails narrowed or terrain boxed in heavier machines, the smaller frame could weave through trees, boulders, or eroded sections without halting. Additionally, the seating configuration allowed for quick ingress and egress in emergency or rescue scenarios, and removable tops or side covers made it adaptable to varied weather conditions. The cabin design offered utilitarian seating and basic instrumentation, but the absence of power-hungry accessories meant fewer opportunities for mechanical failure in remote areas. Even the modest steel wheels and compact tires could be replaced or repaired with minimal equipment, and spares could be carried without excessive storage concerns. The vehicle did not attempt to impress with acceleration or plush ride comfort. It aimed at stability and control, enabling the driver to manage slippery slopes or loose scree with confidence. In communities facing topographical challenges, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 became a common sight, especially in places where maintaining large paved roads was impractical or too costly. Overland travelers discovered that the manageable weight reduced strain on bridges, ferries, and temporary crossings, further broadening its appeal in areas with limited infrastructure. The vehicle also facilitated small-scale commerce and transportation in villages, enabling owners to transport goods to town markets or deliver supplies to remote homesteads. The visibility offered by the cabin layout, along with the stable stance and modest wheel articulation, allowed drivers to assess terrain in real time without over-reliance on spotters. The licensing and registration process was often simpler due to its status as a lightweight utility vehicle, and insurance costs typically undercut those of heavier rivals. As local workshops gained familiarity with the platform, availability of parts and knowledge increased. Brick-and-mortar shops and mobile mechanics alike learned the nuances of the drivetrain and engine tolerances. When minor faults arose, they could be addressed without specialized diagnostic equipment or extensive downtime. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 carried its foundational strengths into new markets as global interest in adaptable vehicles accelerated during the late 70s and early 80s. Its blend of compact form and practical engineering resonated across regions with diverse road conditions. In many territories, the model became an unexpected reference point for how small displacement engines could operate efficiently within challenging landscapes. Manufacturers observed how the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 established credibility not by overpowering obstacles but by navigating them with traction management, manageable weight, and driver-focused design. This approach contrasted the dominant mindset that heavier frames and complex suspensions were mandatory for off-road reliability. As communities in mountainous, coastal, and agricultural areas continued adopting the model, data accumulated on its performance under different climates and altitudes. Reports indicated that the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 handled steep gradients at controlled speeds, even when air density or soil composition worked against traction. Local agencies in island nations used it as transport for inspection crews and maintenance teams, noting its ability to reach utilities with narrow access paths. In colder climates, operators adapted it with snow chains and improvised cabin insulation, which affirmed its compatibility with harsh seasons. Its manual controls gave drivers direct input that minimized power loss, while the drivetrain's simplicity reduced risk of malfunction in extreme temperature shifts. Over time, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 developed a distinct identity among professionals who needed reliable movement across undeveloped track systems. Governments and organizations recognized that the cost-to-benefit ratio favored the model when budgets were limited and service infrastructure was sparse. This made the vehicle an attractive fleet option for tasks like forestry checks, wildlife monitoring, and emergency supply deliveries. Rather than replacing larger trucks outright, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 often worked alongside them, handling assignments in terrain that restricted bulkier transports. Because its measurements resembled those of subcompact passenger cars, certain jurisdictions allowed easier licensing classifications, further decreasing barriers to adoption. Enthusiasts also became involved at grassroots levels, demonstrating the vehicle's capability in recreational settings, from hill climbs to overland tours. This audience appreciated that the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 did not require specialized electronics to manage wheel slip or torque distribution. Driver skill and mechanical leverage shaped most outcomes. The rise of user communities led to publications and meetups where owners shared insights on long-distance travel, maintenance intervals, and modifications. Many described how the model excelled during controlled tests and informal expeditions where rolling resistance, mud depth, and incline angles were measured more critically. Some users added auxiliary fuel tanks or spare tire mounts to extend range, while others experimented with mild suspension lifts to handle uneven rock beds. The model's construction allowed these changes without undermining structural rigidity, which was essential for maintaining cabin integrity in high-load conditions. The flexibility of the platform prompted discussions about its potential adaptation for specialized trades such as surveying, pipeline inspection, and light-duty towing within confined sites. In places with complicated import regulations, local assembly or parts sourcing was developed to keep the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 viable as demand persisted. Some workshops trained technicians specifically for its maintenance, resulting in faster turnaround times and lower ownership costs. Replacement parts like clutch components, brake cylinders, and spring bushings were stocked by suppliers who recognized the consistent market. The mechanical layout remained forgiving to less experienced mechanics, who only needed standard tools to address most failures. Owners reported that even after years of exposure to dust, mud, and humidity, the vehicle kept operating as long as its fluids were maintained and its filters replaced periodically. The reliability record further convinced buyers that simplicity was not a disadvantage but a long-term asset. In industrial hubs, engineers studied the drivetrain to understand how small engines could be matched to gear ratios for maximum traction without resorting to high-output horsepower. Some analysts predicted an eventual shift in consumer expectations toward efficient, utility-oriented platforms that moved away from oversized frames. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 appeared to be an early example of what that shift might look like in practice. It also influenced debates about emission standards and fuel consumption, with regulators observing that smaller displacement vehicles might offer a path to compliance without compromising mobility. Consumer reception evolved as the model became known for handling steep gradients and slippery ground where more powerful units risked getting bogged down. With the rise of recreational off-roading, videos and reports circulated showing the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 traversing forest tracks and shallow riverbeds. These showcases emphasized the role of balanced weight distribution and short wheelbase in maintaining traction and avoiding undercarriage damage. In many cases, drivers discovered that the model's performance did not degrade significantly when carrying light cargo or extra passengers, as long as weight was distributed evenly. Rental operators in tourist areas used the vehicles to guide visitors through nature trails, highlighting both scenery and mechanical durability. Fuel stations in remote regions observed frequent visits from Suzuki Jimny LJ80 owners conducting supply runs, reinforcing its presence as a daily driver rather than an occasional tool. Its compact structure also meant that replacements for body panels and windows could be installed quickly when minor damage occurred. This efficiency lowered insurance costs and encouraged retention rather than replacement. Some governmental fleets extended the operating life of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 through refurbishment programs, which included rust prevention treatments, engine overhauls, and fitment of updated safety lights. The modifications rarely interfered with the original drivetrain, preserving its core identity. Assembly lines in certain markets experimented with slight alterations in trim or upholstery, but those changes never overshadowed the mechanical design. As time progressed, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 demonstrated that a vehicle could serve in both civilian and professional contexts without segmenting itself into niche categories. Military observers in small nations noted its use for reconnaissance or supply transport, though they rarely publicized it as a frontline resource. The reason for that discretion stemmed from a desire to avoid conflating utility with roles that required armored or specialized machinery. The adaptive nature of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 meant it could participate in a spectrum of tasks across borders and climates. Developments in drivetrain technology continued elsewhere, but the lessons from this compact platform informed how certain manufacturers evaluated torque curves, suspension clearances, and body protection. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 eventually transitioned from a contemporary solution to a historical reference point, yet its legacy continues to influence design and consumer perception decades later. By the time production ended, the platform had already proven that off-road engineering could prioritize efficiency, accessibility, and maneuverability without surrendering capability. This achievement resonates today as compact four-wheel drive vehicles gain renewed attention in markets concerned about environmental standards, urban congestion, and practical versatility. Engineers frequently reference the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 when discussing how to scale drivetrain solutions and weight management strategies to meet modern demands. Its story is not just about what it accomplished in the late 70s and early 80s, it is about how its philosophy persists in shaping expectations. As modern buyers look for vehicles that can handle both city driving and rural challenges, the compact utility mindset first embodied by the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 feels remarkably current. Analysts often highlight how its minimalism avoided complications that later plagued electronics-heavy platforms, reinforcing the value of mechanical transparency. Enthusiast groups remain active, restoring surviving units and demonstrating their abilities at gatherings, showcasing how the original vision remains relevant. These gatherings provide living demonstrations of how the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 continues to neutralize skepticism, climbing inclines and crossing obstacles with the same fundamental principles that impressed drivers nearly 50 years ago. The emotional connection among owners is also noteworthy. Many associate the model with formative experiences, whether learning to drive in rugged terrain, running family farms, or embarking on early expeditions. That sense of personal history ties into a broader narrative of durability, resourcefulness, and independence. Beyond nostalgia, industry observers point to how the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 influenced regulatory and consumer acceptance of small off-road categories. It created space for discussions about emissions-friendly alternatives that do not compromise functionality. It also demonstrated that affordability could coexist with capability, shaping how manufacturers approached entry-level segments. In global automotive museums and historical showcases, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 is now displayed as a landmark example of small-scale ingenuity. Collectors value it not simply for rarity but for what it represents, a moment when design priorities shifted and inspired long-term change. For regions still relying on older units, its continued presence reflects endurance and practicality rather than mere sentimentality. As restoration parts remain available through specialized networks, Many owners keep their Suzuki Jimny LJ80 vehicles on the road, extending a heritage of usefulness into the present day. That ongoing visibility reinforces the original lesson that innovation can take the form of simplification rather than escalation. In analyzing automotive history, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 stands as proof that breakthroughs do not always emerge from massive investment or advanced luxury technologies. Sometimes they emerge from focusing tightly on the essentials. This perspective explains why the vehicle remains a frequent subject of documentaries, enthusiast reviews, and academic studies exploring the evolution of four-wheel drive systems. Every time a compact off-road platform enters the market, analysts draw parallels to the path first carved by the Suzuki Jimny LJ80. Its DNA persists in how modern vehicles balance weight, torque, and frame rigidity for diverse terrains. While contemporary models feature advanced safety aids and emissions technologies, the foundational principles remain unchanged. Ultimately, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 did more than provide affordable mobility. It reframed what drivers expected from vehicles of its size. It proved that determination, careful engineering, and practical design could extend capability beyond traditional categories. This influence endures, ensuring that the story of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 remains more than a historical footnote. It remains a guidepost for where utility and innovation intersect. Its journey from a questioned experiment to a respected global legend is complete, but its lessons remain ongoing. That lasting relevance is why the vehicle continues to be celebrated, studied, and driven, connecting the past to the present in a way few models ever manage. The influence of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 stretches far beyond its production years, leaving a legacy that still informs design strategies and consumer interests. Looking back, it is clear that the vehicle succeeded because it offered a different vision of what capability should look like. Instead of overwhelming users with complexities and elevated costs, it relied on thoughtful mechanics, proportion, and simplicity. Owners around the world discovered that a small platform could accomplish tasks usually reserved for significantly larger machines, reinforcing the idea that utility does not need to come packaged in excess. The lasting impact of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 is reflected not only in how enthusiasts preserve it but also in how manufacturers continue to apply its principles. While the automotive industry often leans toward high-output engines and digital control systems, there remains a recognized value in reducing weight, refining drivetrains, and improving serviceability. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 demonstrated that every component counts, especially in remote or demanding environments where maintenance resources may be limited. It communicated a message to drivers: a vehicle can be both modest and capable, both compact and ready for rugged assignments. The continued presence of restored or well-kept units illustrates an enduring respect for practical design. Drivers who still use the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 for daily tasks or recreation do so because it continues to deliver dependable performance. The emotional bond that owners express speaks to how deeply the vehicle embedded itself in personal and regional histories. Across continents, it became a connector between villages, a tool for family livelihoods, and a gateway to regions otherwise out of reach. That kind of imprint goes beyond technical specifications and influences how future vehicles are imagined. As off-road tourism and outdoor recreation continue to grow, people look for platforms that combine manageability with reliable traction. The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 helped define that sweet spot almost half a century ago. Even with advanced technology shaping modern models, the practice of scaling down rather than inflating dimensions owes a direct debt to this compact pioneer. New vehicles may add safety features, infotainment systems, and refined ride dynamics, but the underlying question remains the same: can it get the driver where larger vehicles cannot? The Suzuki Jimny LJ80 answered that question with decades of proof. For historians and analysts, the model represents a shift in how off-road design philosophy could be applied to broader contexts. It emphasized that innovation need not arrive with flash, it can arrive through consistent, repeatable performance. Current interpretations of lightweight four-wheel drive design owe part of their thought process to the benchmarks established in the late 1970s. International markets still show interest in vehicles that share attributes first seen in the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 because those attributes address real-world needs. In summation, the story of the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 is the story of a machine that changed expectations. It challenged the notion that bigger was automatically better and confirmed that ingenuity could thrive within a compact footprint. It supported farmers, explorers, public agencies, and families with a combination of traction, accessibility, and cost-effectiveness that few competitors matched. Its ongoing presence in restorations, collector circles, and remote communities speaks to a level of durability and respect that many vehicles never achieve. For anyone evaluating the evolution of four-wheel drive platforms, the Suzuki Jimny LJ80 stands as a case study in lasting impact. If you enjoyed this deep look into a landmark series, remember to like and subscribe, and share which model or era you want to explore next.